All right, so we'll get started. Very simply, this is going to be a personal video log project in order to record my thoughts on reading Aristotle's categories. I would like to give a general overview. This isn't necessarily for anyone, it's more just organizing my thoughts. I will be posting this to YouTube in the off chance somebody wants to watch it. It will absolutely be no frills, no edits. You're either gonna like it or you're not. And so this is primarily for me to voice and then be able to listen back to and self-comment on, which is a little ridiculous, but I've also just hit a point where I need more interlocutors, and there's not enough people who are willing to make time to discuss something as pedantic as the implications of Aristotelian revival on contemporary practice. So here I am creating a video log of that concept so that I can rebuild that construct and look at the entailments so I can better organize my own thoughts for my PhD work. Um, so to begin, I just finished a graduate level research class, which was entirely disappointing. Don't need to go into that. But in it, I did find in my lit review the work of Katrin Ettenhuber, who did an analysis of the logical renaissance in the early modern period for English literature. Great read, excellent Cambridge scholar. It's been fantastic so far. That book was published in 2024 this year. And so far, I'm on chapter 4 of her work. She's made really clear that the role of Agricola and of, I can't ever pronounce the guy's name, John Melanchthon, their works and the work of Ramism really had a profound impact on the prevalence of logic in college curriculum. So one of the things that I'm really interested in is why the humanities no longer study logic, and especially why is Aristotle not standard reading for the Western canon if you're going to school in a Western tradition. I actually don't know of a good reason why we're not reading Aristotle and instead we're reading, whatever garbage university standard publishing is happening. My current linguistics textbook from Ohio State is a prime example. I don't know why we're not just reading classical philological canon instead. It's in the public domain. It shouldn't cost anything. The linguistics book that's published by Ohio State that I'm currently reading is garbage anyway. So I'm really interested in this whole is newer better. I don't think it is. I think there needs to be quality recognition of achievement of human thought. Currently, we have this weird false narrative that progressively society has gotten more intelligent and what we have to say is more meaningful than what people in the past had to say somehow. I don't think that's the case. I think it's much more like human achievement in a lot of scenarios, like the pinnacle of human achievement happens within lifetimes. It doesn't happen progressively. I think that's a false narrative that's theologically grounded in Christianity and a nomothetic view of the reversal of the fall, but that's a whole theological discussion. So primarily for this, I'm reviewing the categories in order to develop a foundational understanding of the peripatetic canon. That is, however, with respect to, and I keep calling it the peripatetic canon because after reading the work of Gutas in philology and in reviewing some literature that I found on Aristotle and the Syriac tradition, I'm forgetting the name of that scholar at the moment, Walsh, I believe, but after reviewing the reality of extant manuscripts and that the oldest extant copy of the Organon that we have is in Arabic and is from 900 CE, there is some contested aspects of whether or not to actually call the works of the Organon Aristotle's. There's definitely grounds to contest authorship, considering the most intact, stretched lineage that we can establish. The most stretched copy of Unical manuscript comes from 300 CE, nearly 400 years after Aristotle's death. So we literally can't say what is and isn't Aristotle, and we know that the closest extant manuscripts we have were from the Syriac tradition, which had at least 3 transmissions from the Greek to whoever prepared the Organon when it left Greece towards either the Roman tradition or towards the Syriac, and then whoever copied it in Antioch, in Kacheka. So, or Kinesha. And so in total, 3 transmissions, we don't know how many copies, and the idea of the integrity of a text is a rather recent one. There's a wonderful book, Fixers, which I haven't gotten a chance to read, but I did listen to the interview for, where I forget the author's name at the moment, but where she explores the reality of contemporary transmission in translation, and the idea of transmission historically as one of reception and transmission of ideas, not necessarily integrity of text or integrity of authorship like we would conceive of it today. So the idea that at some point Aristotle's works went from Athens to Antioch to Kinesha to Baghdad, and then found their way from there, from the line of the Syriac tradition into Arabic, and then were continued with the work of Ibn Sina and Averroes later. That line is an extant in a different line of extant manuscripts from the Greek-Latin transmission, and the Latin transmission of Boethius has similar discrepancies. Boethius, the oldest extant copy that Gutas references in his analysis, as far as I remember, is sometime also in 600, 700 CE. So again, I tend to view the Peripatetic more as the Peripatetic, and I think it's more accurate to say that it's a pan-Eurasian tradition of logical scholarship. So that's the frame that I'm working from. My impetus in doing so is to essentially undermine the contemporary structure of academia in order to highlight that the lack of erudition is largely due to the abandonment of a logical foundation which facilitates intersubjective discourse in a recognized meta-language. So the ability to arbitrate and to present evidence and have actual semi-formal rules for what constitutes a viable form of discourse actually played, in my opinion, a rather large role in the success of the Western tradition, which again, I would more so call the Eurasian tradition, or after Ferdinand Rodel, the Mediterranean traditions of erudition and pedagogy. In this sense, the third point, I guess, that I would like to make in that is that I feel like there's been a rather egregious error in transmission that has not been addressed contemporary scholarship very well, which is that the transmission of Aristotle's works were heavily filtered through Christian lenses. And so any notion which disproved any concept of nomothetic reality, of a transcendent metaphysical reality, of a unified experience of kingdom, of any of those Christian concepts, would have been somewhat scrubbed. So I believe that within the Peripatetic tradition, because Aristotle actually worked from more of a medical frame, and I'm very interested to get into Ibn Sina's work because he preserved the medical value in the Peripatetic's logical canon. I think that frame of ontological differentia that is retained in the categories is quintessentially in need of revision away from Christian narratives and to be held again as one of a polytheistic tradition grounded in medicine. Now, I'm not saying that Aristotle's theological views did not perhaps coalesce in a more, shall we say, in a more contemporary frame of an analytic deductive skeptic. It's who knows? But I do not think that he would have been endorsing a grandiose vision of Christianity. And I think a lot of the narrative around Thomas Aquinas, who tried to use Aristotle's logic in order to validate the Christian view, hijacked a lot of his view of metaphysics toward that aim, rather than what I'm proposing is that Aristotle and Peripatetic canon is actually best considered under an embodied cognitive perspective as understanding the limitations of instrumentation with regard to phenomena and the method of differentiation of category as creating a different class of ontology from which to present deductive reasoning or from which to demonstrate knowledge in an entheum. So with that in mind, this is kind of my overview intro video. I will be reading from the 2014 Oxford edition of the collected works of Aristotle. In that, the categories is Ackrell's translation, I believe from the 60s. So I will be reading it in English, sadly. I am not proficient in Greek. I am not proficient in Arabic. And I am not proficient in Latin. Alas, I was educated in America. So I will be reviewing the works in English and giving and using the Becker's number system in order to give commentary on each section and also sort of give exposition of whatever entailments I see. That's part of my own pedagogical process and part of my own autodidactic process in order to integrate the knowledge being presented into my own semantic web. And I hope that these videos allow me to have a third interface from which to then review, critique, and refine my own perspectives in subsequent follow-ups. So, yeah, with that, I'll get started.